Welcome back,
Yeah.
or front,
Good.
or side to side. We're side to side.
We are.
We're glad you're with us. We are continuing our studies about prayer, and we've got a new topic for today.
We do. This one's going to be coming from Matthew chapter 6, verse 7. And when you pray, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard for their many words. So, our topic for today is simplicity. Basically, prayer doesn't have to be complicated, it's as simple as that.
Yeah, a little child can pray.
Mhm.
It's not, and too, at some point, remind me before we finish, I do want to deal with that empty phrases part too. But yeah, even a little child, they may not know even how to say a lot of words, but you remember the joke about the little girl who said, our Father Howard who art in heaven, or she didn't know how to say hallowed be thy herald be thy name instead of hallowed be thy name. She didn't know that word. But that's the thing about it. It doesn't have to be complicated.
Yep. Um, and actually, along those lines, the hallowed be thy name, the prayer that Jesus uses to teach his disciples, in the King James Version, Jesus's prayer is about 620 words long. Now, compared to some of the ones that we've been looking at along with this lesson, that's a pretty long prayer. Compared to some of the ones we're going to be looking at, that's not all that long of a prayer. I'm sure that
Yeah, people often call that the Lord's Prayer. That's the sample prayer.
that's a sample
The
prayer.
Lord's Prayer is actually over in John 17, and it's a lot longer than that.
Yes.
And we don't even have everything that he prayed.
But the important thing that I want to pull from that isn't how long it was, but rather that in that 620 words, only 14 words are more than 2 syllables.
Yeah.
That's how simple this prayer was. That out of 620, only 14 of the words were more than 2 syllables long. He was using a lot of very simple words, even in the King James Version.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty
more complicated than the easy to read version or something.
I haven't looked at it in an easier to read version, but I imagine it would be even simpler in one of those.
Yeah, you think about that. That's really actually almost 98%, over 97% of the words that he used.
Yes.
Were 2 syllables or less. And Jesus is the Son of God.
Mm-hmm.
He knows any word. He could use any word he wanted to use, but he chose. Of course, now that's the translation. I don't know. We'd have to look at the Greek and see.
Well, Greek words on average are longer because they have endings and stuff.
They have some weird things that we don't have in English. But still, that's just amazing.
It's very, very simple, and it goes to show that in Jesus trying to teach a prayer, I don't know, again, there's some translation difference, but we can kind of see that simplicity was a part of it, that it was a very simple prayer. And so that we can keep that in mind during our prayers and in our prayer lives, that don't have to use a lot of fancy $12 words. We can keep things simple. God understands. That said, on the other side of things, sometimes things are complicated. And we have to use complicated, big words to explain what's going on in our lives, in our minds, in our hearts. And God's okay with that too. Just like it says at the beginning, don't heap things up if it's meaningless.
Yeah, so let's think about that. Empty phrases, heaping up empty phrases. Some translations may say vain phrases or meaningless. I mean, what does anybody still do that? Anybody that uses empty phrases? I think sometimes we do. I think sometimes, and it's not that the phrase that itself doesn't actually have a meaning, but sometimes we've learned a phrase and included in our prayers that really doesn't have any meaning. It's really empty.
or even if it does have a meaning, we haven't assigned a meaning
Yeah.
to it.
Well,
We're
we're
just
not.
like, oh, this is a
We're just
phrase
saying it.
that should be in a prayer.
Yeah.
When does
And
it have to
and
be in a
there's
prayer?
not anything wrong necessarily with that phrase itself. It's just that the way we're using it, it becomes uh, what we sometimes would call a canned prayer instead of something that's fresh, where we just say the same phrases. As I'm reminded of the story, and I hope it's not you that did this, but I remember hearing this story from the time I was a kid. The guy would say in his prayer, always he would say, and Lord, clean out the cobwebs of sin from our mind, or something similar to that. Which I'm sure the first time he said it, it probably meant something, or the first time somebody said it, it probably had. And I don't know if that guy originated or somebody else, but he kept saying every time he would lead the prayer, Lord, clear out the cobwebs from our mind. And so finally, after time and time again of this happening, finally one of the other men in the church hollered out in the middle of his prayer when he said that. He said, Lord, please just kill the spider. And, sometimes though we do say these phrases that just, I mean, what does that even mean? Clean out the cobwebs of sin from our mind? What I don't, I mean, I guess there could be some meaning to that, but it's a little too abstract for me. Maybe you understand it better than I do. But yeah, we definitely want to be careful because the words that we use they should have meaning. We're talking to God. It should mean something. And we do. We have a lot of phrases in the church that we use in prayers. There's not anything wrong with the phrase itself, but sometimes we're saying it vainly, which means we're saying it without really thinking about it or meaning it. It's just something we've heard said, and so we repeat it. And it's one thing to repeat something when we're first learning, but as we learn, we need to, we talk about openness, we need to open up and have honesty from our heart and not just from something we've learned.
And then realize, hey, this person I heard saying in the public prayer said this, and at the time I thought it was good, but now I realize that doesn't really fit where I am
It doesn't fit what
anymore.
I want to
Yeah,
say to God. Yeah.
that's not where my relationship with God is anymore. I need to move past that, and we need to be open enough to realize that.
We need to be growing in our prayer, and growth in prayer is not that's not the opposite of simplicity.
No,
There is room for growth and yet still room for simplicity at the same time. But that's something for us to think about. Um, and one of the things you've got in the lesson here, 1 Corinthians 14:15.
I was about to get to that.
Yeah, what's that one?
So 1 Corinthians 14:15 says, "What am I to do? I will pray with my spirit, but I will pray with my mind also. I will sing praise with my spirit, but I will sing with my mind also." And so Paul puts in the spirit, mind. I also like to go to where is it? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and bring it all in when it comes to prayer, so that you're not just spirit and mind. It's everything. It's heart, soul, mind. It's all of it. And so when you're praying, when it comes to simplicity, you've got to keep your mind open about what you're saying, because I know all the time. I noticed this just last night where I was starting my prayer. I said, God, thank you for this day. And I said it just so uncaring and dead that I was just like, what did I just say?
Yeah, it just becomes a phrase we
Yes.
say because we're supposed to say it.
Yes.
Thank you for this day. Thank you for this
Or
food.
I've just gotten into the habit that that's just how I start my personal prayers with God, is just, God, thank you for this day. And just last night, it appalled me that I was like, I really am thankful for today, and I'm thankful that He's given me today. But if anybody heard me say it just now, they would not believe that, because
It sounded empty.
it was empty, because I didn't have my mind and my heart into what I was saying at the beginning. And that's why we need to be all in when we're praying, whether it's for simplicity or honesty or any of the other things that we've talked about. When we're praying, it needs to be all in just us and God. Because otherwise, our prayers are going to be empty. They're going to sound dead. And in part, it's going to be because they are dead.
And then we have to wonder, even at some point, does God just quit listening?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, even though he wants us to pray, it was his idea. It's not like we came up with the idea, hey, we want to talk to God. He said, come talk to me. But he wants us to talk to him. He doesn't want us to just repeat. And even like a lot of people will take what they call the Lord's Prayer there, where Jesus is teaching prayer, and they'll just repeat that prayer. Well, Jesus wasn't saying go repeat this prayer for the next 2,000 years.
Yeah.
It's a learning the message. Here's how you pray. Here's the things that you talk about in your prayer. That's what he was getting at, instead of just, hey, everybody for the next 2,000 years say this prayer. 6 billion people, 7 billion people saying this same prayer to God every day. That's what he wants to hear. No, he doesn't want to just hear that same prayer 7 billion times a day from everybody on earth. That's not what he's wanting at all. He wants to hear what we have to say to him, what's on our heart, what's in our spirit and in our mind. But we need to understand what we're saying there.
I think the last thing that I want to bring up here is some translations of Matthew 6:7, which we started off with. If I remember correctly, they translate empty phrases as a vain repetition.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I think we look at that and we're like, repetition in prayers is bad. Let's
never
not
say the same thing ever again.
Things. And then later on where it says they'll be heard by their many words. Okay, lots of words. So repetition and lots of words. I can't do these things, so I really shouldn't repeat myself. That's not what's being said here. If something is troubling you and it is on your heart and it refuses to go away,
Pray every day. Pray
Yes.
10 times a day.
And if you are dealing with it for weeks or months or years, talk about it and talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. It doesn't matter if it's getting old. It doesn't matter if you are sick of it. It doesn't matter. It's a problem that you're dealing with, and God is there for you.
Yeah, as long as it's not empty. As long as it's not, if it's really what you feel, really what you want to talk to God about, really what you need to talk about, then talk about it. And we see this with Jesus and with Paul both. Jesus went in the garden, he went and prayed, and one of the Gospels says he prayed using the same words. He said the same thing 3 times, but it wasn't empty repetition on those occasions, because he really meant it. If it's from the Spirit and from the mind, and it's really meant, it's sincere, and you're being open with God, he does want to hear it every time. It's kind of like, if I tell my wife I love her, and I just say, I love you. And I say that every day. Maybe even I say it 10 times, love you, love you, love you, love you. That's not going to mean much to her. But if I hold her, look deep into her eyes and say, darling, I love you so much, that's going to mean something. And if I did that every day, that would not get old to her. And that's the way it is with God. There are things where if we're just repeating it because it needs to be, because we just always say this is what we say. And we all fall into that trap. I mean, we don't want to give you the idea that we always have fresh things to say. It's so easy to fall into that trap.
And even when there is something on my heart that I'm like, I really need to deal with this, but I've already talked to him about this so many times before. It's getting old, and I don't want to bring this up again. I don't want to repeat myself again when I've already been through this 7 times, 10 times, however many times, where I've already talked to him about this. I've already used these words, but it doesn't matter. You don't need fresh stuff every single time. Life gets repetitive. and boring and new
And we
things.
struggle with
Yeah.
the same struggles a lot of times.
Mhm.
It is the
Yeah.
same thing. And
We're
something, I mean, we eat every day, so we should thank him for the food we're eating every day. Speaking of, it's about time to go eat something.
yeah. So in closing out, God doesn't care how big your vocabulary is. His is bigger. Don't try to impress him. Don't try to show off. If you need to use a big complicated word because you can't think of a smaller one, he's gonna understand that. Don't be afraid to repeat yourself if you need to, if it's on your heart, even if you're scared of repeating yourself. If you need to repeat yourself until you get your problems off your chest. And don't be afraid to just let it off and just get rid of it because it will be a lot better for you once you do.
But quit trying to impress God. I like what
Mhm.
Xander had here. God knows every word that exists, has existed, and will exist in every language that exists, has existed, and will exist. You're not going to impress him with your words.
Mhm.
That's not what prayer is about. So hope we'll keep it simple
Yep.
so that we can have a good relationship with God and a good conversation with him.
Do you find it funny that the one on simplicity and kind of shortness is our
It's like
longest?
really long.
Yeah.
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 Well,
We got kind of carried away with this one. Sorry.
but we used a lot of simple words to do it.
Did we?
I don't know.
We'll have to watch back through and make sure I didn't throw
We
out
could have just,
big
yeah,
fancy one.
we could have just had like a 5-second one. Don't be overly complicated.
Don't complicate things.
Yeah.
That's the
So
takeaway.
that's the takeaway. All right. Well, we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Take care.
See you then.